Floods in Nigeria kill at least 49, displace thousands. Officials remain worried over heavy rains that have caused flooding as the rainy season is yet to peak. At least 49 people have been killed and thousands displaced in Nigeria after heavy rains caused flooding in the northeast of the country, the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, has said. 3 states in the northeast, Jigawa, Adamawa and Taraba, have been hit hard by floods, with 41,344 people displaced, NEMA spokesperson Manzo Ezekiel said Monday. In 2022, Nigeria experienced its worst flood in more than a decade, which killed more than 600 people, displaced around 1.4 million, and destroyed 440,000 hectares, 1.1 million acres, of farmland. We are just entering into the peak of the season, particularly in the northern part of the country, and the situation is very dire, Ezekiel told Reuters. The floods have also destroyed farmlands, affecting around 693 hectares, 1,712 acres, of agricultural land. Nigeria is battling double-digit inflation, which has been stoked by high food prices. Heavy rains have added to problems in the farming sector, where farmers are deserting their farms in the northeast due to repeated attacks by armed individuals. Many officials remain worried and are bracing for more destruction as the rainy season is yet to peak. We have September, October to come. The rain is much more in September than in August, so only God knows what the state will be when we reach that time, Haruna Mairiga of the Jigawa Emergency Management Agency told Al Jazeera. According to Al Jazeera's Ahmed Idris, reporting from Nigeria, the government says 110 kilometers, 68 miles, of embankments have been constructed, but the flooding continues to claim lives and property, diverting scarce government resources meant for development. The government said this year that 31 of the country's 36 states were at risk of experiencing high flood. We also have information about the high tide in the upper countries of the River Niger before Nigeria, Ezekiel said. All of these are flowing towards Nigeria. We are beginning to see a manifestation of our predictions.
Joining us, an environmentalist, Desmond Majekodumi, to discuss the impact of flooding on the environment. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you.
All right, so Desmond, how widespread and frequent, have flooding events become in Nigeria over the past decade?
Nigeria, just like every other country in the world, is beginning to experience far more dramatic and severe weather conditions. And one of those weather conditions is heavier rain. And it's really the most basic and fundamental of science, because there is more heat coming onto this planet right now. In fact, 2023 was the hottest year ever recorded by humanity. Already in 2024, we've had 3 of the hottest days ever recorded. And if you have more heat, you're going to have more evaporation from the water. And if you have more evaporation, you're going to have heavier rain. So what's actually happening now in Nigeria and many, many other countries in the world is what they call rain bombs, where tremendous amounts of rain will just fall in a short amount of time. And this is what is causing the floods. And unfortunately, our hearts go out to our citizens who are affected by this. But it is happening more frequently and more severely in our dear country. It's a major issue. We were warned about it. The scientists of the world told us many decades ago that if we continued pouring the amount of poison that we're pouring, the amount of toxic gases that we're pouring into the atmosphere, we're going to upset this very intricate, but what can only be classified as a miraculous system that keeps this earth running in such a wonderful way. And that's exactly what we've done. So we're now experiencing the results of our negative actions against nature. And there's one thing about nature: she gives you back whatever you sow into her.
Sad indeed, Desmond. Now, as an environmentalist, can you explain the primary ecological impacts of flooding on Nigeria's ecosystem? And I'm talking about forests, coastal areas, and the rest.
Yes, you see, the reality is that nature is such a wonderful, wonderful system. And naturally, you will have, some heavier types of rain. This has happened throughout the history of this earth. But nature herself has a way to adapt to this. And that's why we have so many streams and so many rivers, and we have these wonderful mangrove areas all along so many of the coasts. And what they do is they absorb the heavier rain or even the lighter rain, and they channel it through the streams and rivers into the lagoons. But what has been happening is that a lot of these streams, a lot of these rivers and natural evacuation systems that nature has provided, they're not so effective now. Why? Because we have destroyed a tremendous amount of the vegetation that is by the streams, that is by the river banks, okay? And that vegetation has multiple roles, like so many of the aspects of nature. And one of those roles in this regard is the root zone. You have millions of roots that are tangled together under the soil. And this is holding the soil in place so that you will not get erosion, okay? So you remove the vegetation, no more roots, a whole bunch of erosion now. And what happens is that erosion pours silt and sand into the river and stream beds. So they come higher and they have less capacity to evacuate the water that comes. And at the same time, we're getting heavier water. So basically, it's nature just telling humanity, hey, wake up and start living harmoniously with me. Because the reality is that mankind, humanity, the human species, requires nature for everything. She relies entirely on nature.
All right,
nature,
now, yeah. Speaking of, sorry to cut you off. Yeah, speaking of nature, we've talked about, displaced people. We've also talked about people dying. But what about, flooding's contribution to the loss of biodiversity in Nigeria, particularly when it comes to endangered species?
It is causing tremendous havoc there. Although it's not causing as much as we humans are causing directly, because we're wiping out many species into extinction. But the flooding definitely affects that. But another aspect, another negative aspect that we are feeling right here in Nigeria and so many other countries in Africa and the rest of the world is what the flooding does to our agricultural systems. Because we are a rain-fed agricultural system country, and we rely on seasonal rains. And when the floods come, sometimes they come out of season and they just wipe out the crops. You've grown crops and you're now waiting, okay, the rains have eased, the crops are going to grow, and then whoa, it just wipes them out. So it is obliterating a lot of our food systems. It's causing terrible, terrible damage. And again, it's a wake-up call, which so many of us are sort of trying to ignore because it's an inconvenient truth. But the reality is that nature is telling humanity, you cannot continue this way. You have been causing far too much harm, far too much damage, which is driven mainly by our unbridled desire for accumulating wealth at all costs. And once you put money ahead of people, ahead of planet, you're going to have problems. And sadly, this is exactly what has been happening. So nature is giving us a warning sign, because if we continue this way, it's going to get a lot worse. We're causing, in some cases now, irreparable damage to the wonderful, miraculous systems, the life support ecosystems of nature. And once you start causing those irreparable damages and you start taking strands out of the web of life, like you referred to, driving species into extinction, they're all part of a web of life. They have roles that they play. You know, there's so many roles, you know, typical role. The elephant in the dry season, the tussle of the elephant, one of the major things the elephant does is it digs water holes for other animals to drink, etc., etc. It has a lot of roles. But you take these species out, then you start damaging the very web of life. And if you take too many strands out of the web, God forbid, it collapses. And in this case, we're talking of our very life support system, the life support systems of our children. And I do believe that we as Africans, we as Nigerians are going to wake up to this call, and we're going to start doing the right thing, stop polluting nature in the way that we've been doing, and just ensure that we are living in harmony with nature. Because as I referred to earlier, nature doesn't need us at all. In fact, if human beings are taken out of the equation, nature will actually revive. But if we change our attitudes, then we shall be actually offering a useful service to nature. And that service is definitely not to cause extinction of species. It's not to cause massive flooding because of the overheating of the atmosphere, which is anthropogenically caused. It is definitely not to do that. It is, in fact, to replenish the earth, to care for creation.
Yes.
This is our injunction. Scriptures.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Desmond, for your time and also for speaking to us on this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Smart Okason TV show. Keep exploring, stay curious, and never stop getting the latest information happening around. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share to keep the intellect flowing. Until next time, keep sharpening and be smart.